We have a very special grandfather clock. This is from our own personal collection. It's made by Walter H. Durfee. Durfee was unique in that he was sort of a middleman of clocks. He basically selected the best features and he put them all together. And this particular clock features an English movement made by J.J. Elliott. That was a clock company in London, England. And they were the very top of the grandfather clocks. And this type of grandfather clock is what we call a 9-tube. That means that it strikes or chimes on 9 tubes every 15 minutes. This was marketed by a company in Philadelphia named Bailey, Banks and Biddle. And the Harrington chimes is what's featured on the clock on the tubes, and it's going to strike here in just a couple minutes. But that is a really special invention of the time. So what makes this particular manufacturer so special is that he was the first to get all of the manufacturers together to make a superior grandfather clock. So the case is made from superior woods, mostly mahogany and sandalwood. He imported the necessary woods that were required to make an extraordinary clock. It stands around 100 inches tall, and all of its massive carvings you can see all throughout. The motif at the top is what they call a green band, and that was a symbol of renewal and ecological awareness, if you will, from what I've researched. But there was no expense spared. Everything, the glass was all beveled glass all throughout. Even the top here was beveled, and that would have been very hard to. That had all been done by hand. This weight here on the side, this weight weighs nearly 40 pounds, and it has lead. They all have lead inserts, but this one has a 40-pound lead insert in there, and that's what it requires to actually power the movement. The movement itself is stamped Walter H. Durfee on the top, and all over it, it's stamped Walter H. Durfee, because this clock and these clocks were so valuable that they were reproduced later on. I've never ran across a reproduction, but just running across any Walter Durfee is extremely rare. This is a pattern number 5. It was made between 1888 and 1905, and there was only a few made of this particular model. And from my research, it said there was only a few hundred, or maybe 500-600 of Durfee clocks period ever known to be made, and he had several different patterns. So he didn't make many, but that's the half-hour chime, and like I say, it does chime every 15 minutes. There's your chime setting there, and then it's Westminster, and then there's another one called 8 bells. I use the Westminster because I find that to be the most pleasant of them. But even up here on the dial, this is called the dial. This is a moon phase. This is hand painted. This is silver. The silver, all this is original. Everything is original finish. Everything is original on the clock. Yeah, it's in really good shape. And sometimes the silvering on these are bad, and you have to get them resilvered, but it's not been touched, and that's really, really unique. These are called numerals, and they're raised. And yeah, it's just a very, very nice survivor of that time when they made a superior clock. There were other companies named Hershey, and the Germans also copied this type of clock, and they weren't quite as high quality. Durfee lost his patent for these clocks, and I don't remember the exact date, but once he lost his patent then the other manufacturers started producing these tubular clocks. They still make tubular clocks today. They're very, very expensive relative to what most grandfather clocks cost. But like I said, the Harrington bells were also made by a company in England. They were invented, and they also, that company sold tubes, or they sold chimes to the Vatican in Rome. So I read that in my research as well, which I found that to be extraordinary. But a clock like this, when it was new, would have been, I think it was something like over $1,000, or it was the equivalent of a person's, it was more than an average person made an entire year in their salary. So it was clearly, it was marketed to a kind of a higher end customer. So all of this has been carved. These feet down here are dragons or gargoyles. I'm not sure exactly what they are, but they're all hand carved and very massive. And all in all, it's just a great clock. There's so much information that could be said about it, and it's hard to kind of condense it all into a short video. But as far as grandfather clocks goes, this is easily the nicest grandfather clock I've ever owned or even ever worked on. And I'm not just saying that because it's one that I own, but it, you know, if it just is. I've worked on many hundreds over the years, and this one is by and far the best of the best. And this was at the height of when they were making them. They started making grandfather clocks in England in the late 1600s. They just had one hand for the hour, and I think we're going to do a video on clock. We have one like that in the shop. I'm going to have a video on it. But the early ones were very small. They got bigger and taller, and they got more refined. And this was just sort of the apex of when they got their most grand and most sophisticated. The London-based movement in this clock is very heavy. It weighs 30 pounds. Your typical grandfather clock movement, modern one, weighs maybe 6 pounds. Everything, the plates are that thick. It's extremely high quality, and it would run for years and years and years, as long as it was taken care of. So I feel very fortunate, very lucky to be the caretaker and preserver of this clock. This clock is, it means a lot to our family. It has actually a very decorated history that we're going to get into at some other point. But for now, I think that's enough information. So, and it runs for a week too, by the way.